places.
Attention, attention. You are listening to a pre-recorded episode of The Curious Realm. Curious Realm is busy traveling the vast void of time and space to find the best paradigm-changing content the universe has to offer. Enjoy the following transmission, and remember, stay curious. Coming to you from the City of the Weird. Exploring topics from the esoteric and unexplored to dimensions unknown. Shining a light of truth on the darkest corners of our reality. Welcome to the Curious Realm. Well, hello everybody. How you doing today? Chris Jordan coming at you in pre-recorded fashion this week. I am out on location in fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. I will be here for, well, the next 3 weeks. This is a long stint for me here. One of my favorite cities in the country. Fantastic stuff. Great researchers here that we are trying to get a few interviews with as well. We're here covering the amazing CES show. Full of technology, things like that for my Talking Sound podcast, and working with a couple clients. But as always promised, we do not do replays. We do not do repeat shows with Curious Realm. We always bring you new content. And with that in mind, our guest in the first segment tonight is the amazing Ryan Edwards. He is author of Cryptids of the World. We will be talking with him about variations and variegations in Sasquatch across North America, why the descriptions of Sasquatch seem to change so much regionally and vary so much regionally. Ryan is a fantastic researcher out of the San Antonio area. I met him at Southeast Texas Bigfoot Roadshow, I guess, about a year and a half ago. And he is one of the upcoming speakers at Falk Monster Festival. He's been on the show before. Welcome back to the show, Ryan Edwards. How you doing, my friend?
Doing good, Chris. It's always good to meet you and always good to be on the show.
Heck yeah, man. Always great talking with you. I saw the other day on Facebook that you were one of the upcoming scheduled speakers at Falk Monster Fest, and I was like, man, it's been a while since we've had Ryan on. I need to chat with him, A, to see how it's going, B, to see how his research is coming. And lo and behold, you have a new book that is getting ready to be released through Eerie Lights Publishing with David Weatherly, correct?
Yes, it's a book I've been working on the past couple of years or so. And I'm finally getting it published right now. It's called Sasquatch, A Prehistory of a Living Legend. It's a Sasquatch book, but it's a Sasquatch book from a different perspective. Because a lot of people see Sasquatch as a modern phenomena, which of course it is, but people don't realize that any creature has a natural history. And it comes from somewhere, right? It just doesn't poof out of nowhere like magic. So I'm talking about, okay, what are the possible origins of Sasquatch? And the anatomy, the physiology, the morphology, the behavioral sets that we can speculate on. Of course,
sure, it's
all speculation. It's one thing I say in the book in the beginning. It's like, okay, all this is speculation. None of it do we know if it's true. But through the data sets, sightings, things like that, we can speculate on what this creature is. And
absolutely. For
me, I see Sasquatch as a pretty much surviving form of megafauna. If you look at prehistoric North America, which is kind of a specialty field I have, it fits in perfectly alongside American mastodons, giant ground sloths, giant American lions.
Giant armadillos.
Glyptodons. It would fit in perfectly. So I talk about, okay, if it fits in with North American fauna, when did this creature get here? What is it? And how has it survived into the modern day?
Yeah.
So it's kind of split up into like the prehistoric North America, the ecology of it, then 3 major candidates for Sasquatch. I talk about Gigantopithecus just because I don't personally believe Giganto is Sasquatch, but of course, you got to bring it up. Paranthropus, because that's been a modern, a good candidate for Sasquatch, and Dryopithecus, a Miocene ape, which for me is the best candidate for Sasquatch. And then I talk about Native American lore, showing that it's been here for thousands of years, a little bit of the anatomy, the behavior set, and ecology of Sasquatch, and how it fits into North America.
Well, you know, and you, of course, have to take into account the Native American lore, things like that, because once again, we see, and this is something interesting that we talked about with Thiago Techi. He is the lone MUFON field investigator, Ryan, for the entire country of Brazil, one of the most populous countries in the world with UFO sightings, and there is an investigator with MUFON, one. And when I asked him how many reports came to him from the peoples outside of the city, the native populations, things like that, he said 2 things. One, we don't get a lot because it's like a good day and a half voyage by a boat one way, you know, to get to Sao Paulo, where he's at. He's like, but aside from that, when you go out there and do research, you find out that the reason that they don't come to us and everything is because it is not an anomaly to them. It's nothing strange to them. So why would they come report it? Why would they come report something that appears in the sky like 2-3 times a week that they've talked about in their histories for hundreds of years? You know, things like that. They have no vested interest in reporting that because it's nothing strange to them.
Yes.
You see? And when you start talking about things like, you know, skinwalkers, you start talking about things like Sasquatch, stuff like that. Those are things that the native populations do not assume to be an anomaly. They assume it to be an actual being that they have talked about for hundreds of years, that is part of their oral history, not just their stories, you know, not just their myth and lore, but part of their actual oral history. And that's something totally different that a lot of people really don't understand, Ryan, is that there's a vast difference between here's a story that we tell around the campfire, and here's a story that we carry on to our children because this is our story.
Yeah. Like, I remember one time I was talking to my grandfather, and he's like, well, one time I saw like a weird looking bug. He said he saw like a grasshopper with like B stripes. And I kind of use that as an analogy for us. Like, okay, us you here in the United States, you see a weird looking bug or something. You're not going to go try to catch it and go tell your local scientist, because you just say, okay, it's a regular thing. It's just part of the natural world. So to these native groups, it's like the same thing. Okay, if it's a part of our natural world, why go and talk about it? It's like, if you go see a deer off the highway, you're not going to tell everyone, oh, I saw a deer. It's a part of the natural world. It's just there. So why talk about it? It's like, it's the same, it's analogous to what they are. It's like to the Native American groups and a lot of Native groups around the world, these creatures are just another natural being. It's a lot of times seen as like a person. So usually talking about them, they really don't, because there's no need to, or it's seen as a taboo.
Yeah, I was going to say it's seen as the fact of, you know, you start talking about them, that's when they show up and start looking for somebody to come back with them. And you know, there are caveats, especially in the American Northwest, Alaska, things like that with Sasquatch and what the natives and locals say, you know, like don't accept salmon from them. You know, don't accept food from them. Don't follow them into the woods. You know, stuff like that. Very, very much oddly, Ryan, a lot of the same things that you hear about people of the Fae. stuff like that.
Yes.
You know, the people that lived in the woods in Europe, that kind of stuff, where fairies, gnomes, elves, all that kind of stuff come from. A lot of the same caveats where it's like, be careful getting into conversation with them, you know, things like that. So with that being said, let's start kind of cracking the nut of Sasquatch across North America and variances in not only sightings, but in what may be breeds of Sasquatch, so to speak.
Yes, like I believe in modern times, like if you're researching Sasquatch, you've probably seen the type chart of like the 6 or 7 types of Sasquatch, and it shows like, okay, relic hominoid, chimpanzee-like, gorilla-like, things like that. I've kind of been interested by that because when some people look at that chart, they see different species, or subspecies of Sasquatch. Mm-hmm. Which, for me, I'm like, okay, first of all, we have to prove the species of Sasquatch exists before we even get into if there are subspecies. It's how can we prove one thing without proving the other phenomena? So it's like, okay, let's not get into the weeds of like, okay, there's subspecies, there's different types, there's this, and that. But with me, I believe, well, at least with my research, that there aren't different types of Sasquatch, as in like species, but they're different what we call ecomorphs. Ecomorphs are when it's the same species, but because of the ecology, they're different. Like, look at gray wolves. The gray wolves up in Alaska are much larger than the ones here in the United States because they have more land, there's more larger species. Look at black bears. The black bears here in the American South are smaller than the ones up in the Pacific Northwest. Yeah. And that's a prime example because ecologically, at least, black bears and Sasquatch are very similar. Look at Jeff Meldrum's and Cliff Barackman's work. They talk about the correlation between black bear environments and Sasquatch environments. And if we look at black bears, the ones up in the Pacific Northwest are much larger. The ones here in the South are much smaller. And we see the exact same thing with Sasquatch. The Sasquatch in the Pacific Northwest are usually 8 to 9 foot tall, patty type, if you want to go by that. Yeah. Gorilla-like. Well, the ones here in the South are more chimpanzee-like, people like to describe them as. Like the Falk Monster, Momo, skunk apes, woolly boogers, all the little colloquial names for the creatures here. They're seen as smaller, usually maybe 6 to 7, maybe 8 feet tall, more violent in nature, usually longer hair. Here you usually do get to smell.
Now, when you say violent in nature, do you mean like more in the realm of like threat display, things like that? Kind of the same way a gorilla would shake trees and, you know, bounce its chest, things like that.
Yeah, more, and also more territorial, it appears. Okay. Like, when we look at the story of the Falk Monster, Bobby Ford was attacked on his own porch by this creature. You usually don't get stories like that up in the Pacific Northwest. And it might be because if we look at here in the American South, the environment is a lot more broken up than like the expanses of the Pacific Northwest. Broken up by towns, rivers, lakes, things like that. So what if these creatures are more territorial because they just have less territory than what the ones up Pacific Northwest have? So it's a possibility they aren't more violent because of like any type of weird genetic malfunction, because some people state that because of the smaller environment there might be less genetic variation, which is a possibility. But behavioral sets and genetic mutations, it's hard to see a correlation with that, at least with humans and primates. So if it doesn't occur in humans and primates, I wouldn't expect it to occur in Sasquatch because that's what they are. They are another primate. But we can't expect them to maybe be more territorial because of less territory. And also the whole saying, like what Lyle Blackburn always says, in the Legend of Otter Creek, they always follow the creeks. They are primates very attuned to waterways. Like if you look at Bigfoot sightings and waterways in North America, they correlate because, of course, these creatures need water. The environment around there, hunting, water, of course, they need a source of water, all that. So, like up and down the whole Mississippi River Delta, you have hundreds of Sasquatch sightings. And if you look at the Pacific Northwest parts of like those riverways up there, like up in Oregon and down in Northern California, they also have a lot of correlations between waterways and Sasquatch sightings. Heck, the Pacific Northwest is known as the rainforest of America.
That's right.
For a reason, high rainfall. There is a correlation between water and Sasquatch. And if we look at the American South, we see the exact same thing. And it's kind of funny because because of these differences, people assume they're different species, but they're just most likely not. They're probably just different variations of the same species, but evolved and adapted for different environments, because there is a different environment from here in the South to the Pacific Northwest, parts of Canada and Alaska. Like they're just morphologically a little different because of the different environments.
Yeah, precisely. And I mean that makes utter sense. You know, mammals do that regularly, and even whenever you're talking, the possibility of, once again, large mammals that survived previous extinctions, ice ages, things like that. Like, I mean, a prime example I give people, not a huge mammal, but definitely a mammal that was there and living with the dinosaurs, like the platypus. Platypus made it through extinction. You know, there's numerous animals that were able to make it through, and I'm not going to say it takes a large breeding population, but whenever you're talking about an animal that can have a lifespan of a good 50 years, something like that, possibly, that's pretty expansive. And we regularly discover species. We didn't discover pandas or lowland gorillas until the last 100 or so years.
Yeah. And like when we talk about like with especially like with survivors, people forget that grizzly bears, black bears, bison, elk, all these creatures lived alongside mammoths, smilodons, American lion, less than 10 to 20,000 years ago. So if these species survived, why couldn't a large, intelligent primate as well?
Yeah.
Like, with me, my hypothesis of the origins of Sasquatch is that it's a Miocene ape known as Dryopithecus that came to North America and evolved alongside the megafaunal species here. Because if you look at the like environment of Pliocene and Pleistocene North America, you would have stated that it was more like a safari in Africa than a North American than Yellowstone. Because the amount of we had proboscideans, elephants, we had camels, we had horses, we had bison, we had antelope, we had all these different species. So you would expect that, how I see it, okay, Pliocene North America is very similar to Africa. Okay, what did Africa have at the time? Apes. And what happened to the apes in Africa during the Pliocene? They became bipedal. They became what we now know as humans. So when people state, oh, Sasquatch is very human-like, I believe, yes, it is, but not necessarily human. It's kind of convergently evolved to become human-like. Like how dolphins and sharks look similar, how hyenas and wolves are similar, but they're not genetically related. They're in a very same niche, so they become ecologically similar.
And a similar environment.
Yes. Because like with Miocene, like with Dryopithecus, it literally means oak ape. These animals lived in oak forests and swamplands of Miocene Europe. Their anatomy suggests at least Dryopithecines had a semi-bipedal locomotion. They have a very long thorax. their limb proportions are 1 to 0.8. Human limb proportions, our arms are 1 to 1. Our arms are as long as our legs. Gorillas, it's 1 to 0.5. They have much longer arms than legs, suggesting a quadrupedal locomotion. While Dryopithecus is right in between human and ape, just like how Sasquatch is described. And this is one thing that's interesting. When you look at the measurements of Patty, guess what her limb measurements are? 1 to 0.8. The exact limb proportions as Dryopithecus. So it's like, that's interesting, a weird little correlation. But also, if you look at the characteristics of like one creature that was a Dryopithecine, which was called Oreopithecus. This creature was known to be an obligate biped about 20 million years ago. So we had a bipedal ape in Europe 20 million years ago. So why couldn't these creatures have gone into, we now know they're in Asia. And at that time, the Beringia was open during the late Miocene, early Pliocene. So, and at that point, it was very much a lush environment, very similar to like Alaska during the summer. So, both these creatures moved across into North America, and then once the Pliocene boundary occurred and Beringia got covered by water, these creatures couldn't go back into Europe, so they became either you evolve or you die. So these creatures adapted to North America and became what we now know as Sasquatch. Because if we look at the anatomy of Sasquatch, there's always two origins I always say about Sasquatch. Either it's a species that's very much similar to what we now know as Sasquatch that's entered here fairly recently, or it's an animal that came here a lot longer and was very non-similar to Sasquatch and had time to evolve. And according to this creature probably entered North America maybe 10 million years ago. And if we look at our own lineage, Homo sapiens, our origins were about maybe 2 to 3 million years ago. So this creature had a lot longer time to evolve in North America than a lot of other in Africa and Asia.
Well, and the one thing that I had up on screen a second ago was an abstract from Nature about Dryopithecus, and I'll bring that back up. The zygomatic processes derived characters which revealed that Dryopithecus is related to the Ponginae and not to the African apes/humans as recently discussed. The remaining morphological features are plesiomorphic and thus provide a good model of a common ancestor of all hominidae. That is important right there. That Dryopithecus shows, and just to decode some of that, the zygomatic process, everybody, is right back here. That's I mean, if you feel the hard part right here in between your ears and the top of your jaw, that's your zygomatic process. I only know that because I have implants back there that they had to make specifically long enough to hit my zygomatic process. So to know that part right there, that mandibular part of our skull, and which once again is a huge part of the morphology of how something evolves. It has to do with its diet. It has to do with the strength of its mandibles and what it's eating in its diet, all kinds of things, to show once again that Dryopithecus of all species shows to be a good model of a common ancestor of all hominidae. And that's us, that's Sasquatch, that's anything hominid. So pretty interesting to see that.
And recent genetic studies have shown that they are direct relations to Pongonoid, or what we now know as orangutans, and also they're very gorilla-like. So they're also possibly a ancestor to gorillas. And when people describe Sasquatch, what is the one ape they always describe it looking like? Gorillas.
Yep.
So there is a lot of correlations between these two creatures. Like, for instance, their jaws, they were very gracile. Because when people think of Sasquatch, they think, okay, this creature has to be robust, very strong. But technically, if you look at the ecology of this creature, it has to have more of a gracile-like jaw. Something that can feed on meats, fruits, leaves. And the jawline of Dryopithecus is very similar to that. It probably ate fruits, nuts, things off of like trees. And some have suggested possibly omnivore and ate maybe some small animals, things like that, because that's what we see in modern chimps. Modern chimps eat monkeys and other meat. And it's a possibility that these creatures, once entered North America, evolved to become more omnivorous, a little bit more carnivorous because of the large amount of prey found in North America. We see Sasquatch hunting, supposedly elk, deer, things like that.
Now, I would gladly say, and this is just me, behavioral science wise, animal wise, things like that, you are hard pressed to find a bear hunting down an elk. And you don't see things like that. You don't see a cougar hunting down an elk, that kind of stuff, because there is a great chance of injury. Even when it comes to reptiles, like I'm a huge herpophile. I love reptiles and amphibians, but even snakes will be wary of the size rat they take on because of their chance of injury. And you also have to wonder, would something that large be expending the amount of energy it takes to stalk? Because most stalking animals like that stalk in groups.
Yes.
You know, there are lone cats, things like that, but they normally stalk prey smaller than themselves. You know, there's normally stalking smaller prey. But I've always had an issue with that characterization of like, oh, look at what it did to this deer. Now, will it, much like a bear, gladly help itself to venison that's laying on the ground? You're darn tootin'.
Yes.
I think it would gladly go up and help itself to any meat. Like, will it catch a squirrel? Will it catch a rabbit? Something like that? Absolutely. But I don't know that a large grazing species like that would be going through the effort to hunt down large game. That's just my formed opinion. I'm not even going to say educated opinion. Just from hunting and knowing what I do about wildlife, things like that, and just the fact that most stalking animals don't stalk something that has a propensity of true danger to them. You know, animals aren't stupid. And it's funny because there seem to be a lot more reports of this going on out there, Ryan, of, you know, look at how it broke this deer's back, you know, things like that. And it's like, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. And once again, all of this is hypothesis, every bit of it. That is my favorite thing about it, is that we do get to hypothesize. We do get to consider what the other options are out there. But yeah, I'm not sure about the big game thing. I've heard it in numerous conversations. I've seen it in numerous threads, and it's like, is there a preponderance of evidence out there to suggest that, Ryan? As far as sightings and things like that, I know that the stories are out there, most definitely. Yeah,
like there is some possible evidence. Like there are stories of people that have Sasquatch live on their property, like, which is a hard part, because sometimes when it comes to the whole Sasquatch living on properties for a long time, I can have issues with that, because a lot of times when you look at these people, it's for the evidence that having Sasquatch, it's very loose. It's mostly just their stories. But a lot of times they describe these creatures chasing down deer and breaking the back limbs or breaking the back leg. in order to make sure the deer doesn't run off. There's a lot of stories about that. And also, I remember a couple of years ago, there was a video on Yellowstone, I believe, of like a herd of bison, and then you see 4 large figures in the background, bipedal figures. And when you do the measurements and all that, I think Tinker Dunker worked on this. The figures are like 8 feet tall and bipedal. And you're like, okay, that's weird. That's not a human. And it looks like they're almost hunting they're at least stalking these bison. And it's like, okay, I could possibly see something like that occurring, but not a lone creature. Of course not. Because, like what you said, the risk of getting hurt. Like, that's why I always have issues with, like, a lot of animal documentaries, dinosaur documentaries, because they show these animals fighting all the time.
Yeah.
Nature doesn't look like that. Predators.
Yeah.
If I'm going to get hurt, I'm not going to do anything.
There may be a head-to-head competition for female. There may be a head-to-head competition for food rights or water rights in a territory or nesting rights. Or even just to say, like, dude, you look like a prick. You know? Yeah. And they challenge each other. But yeah, it's not like, oh, these two things are going to fight it out just for the heck of it. Like, no, that's not how it works. Yeah.
And a lot of times those fights don't even get into combat. They show off who's bigger and the other one walks away.
That's right.
Because they know if I get in the fight, I can break a limb and boom, I can't hunt. I'm going to die.
Yeah.
So it's like animals are a lot smarter than what people think. And it's like, okay, fighting all the time and the whole violent nature. No, animals aren't like that. Like a lot of times bears and wolves, when a bear comes onto a wolf kill, the wolves walk away because, okay, if I get hurt by this bear, I can't hunt.
Yeah.
Let's just walk away.
Well, you're no good to the pack. And if you're no good to the pack, then, well, have fun, lone wolf. Hope you make it through the winter. You know, quite literally, that's what happens. And, you know, they leave the lame ones behind. They don't care for them. That's in every herd or pack animal to be that way. It is literal survival of the fittest. So, there's, and, you know, even when you're getting into the fact of, Bigfoot going out and, raiding people's stuff, things like that, coming into camps. I don't know. I've even been wary about, now I know that there are like no light trail cams, stuff like that, you know, that have just extremely low light sensors and they do not use infrared light. But even using infrared light, things like that out in the middle of the woods at night to find a nocturnal animal, like, you realize that infrared light is literally like a spotlight to them because they can see into that near infrared range, you know? So yeah, like that's how they're able to see at night is because of that. So yeah, there are a few things that have always squirreled me out when it comes to investigation and things like that. Because once again, that's the one thing that I love about you is that you keep things in a very common sense point of view, Ryan. And saying that, yes, these things very well can be, but let's rein things in and let's focus on what is provable, not only statistically, but probability wise, you know, what the chain of events possibly was to lead to this species or species, and even to the variations that exist. Because once again, when you start getting into bears, stuff like that, black bears range across the United States, and the ones in the northeast, northwest, where they have harder winters, are much bigger than the ones that we have here in Texas. And for a long time, black bears were endangered. Some people thought that black bears were even like gone from the state of Texas. But they are on the rise so much that San Antonio recently put out alerts for hikers and things like that. that be careful. Black bears are out and they're real and they're a thing. And they are coming back in larger numbers. They are no longer on the state endangered list. And even when you start looking at the black bear sightings in Texas and things like that, where they are starting to pop up again in East Texas and everything else seem to be where a lot of Bigfoot sightings are, and if you grew up somewhere, especially where black bear were not common, black bear weren't anything like when I was brought up hunting and things like that, Ryan, we worried about pigs on the trail. Yes. We worried about wild hogs and running into them. We didn't really worry about running into a random bear in the woods like you do in Maine, where I lived for 5-6 years. Like that's a place where if you're wandering around in the woods, be careful for a bear. You didn't really have to worry about that in Texas. So to know that black bear are on the bounce back, enough to be coming off the endangered species list in the state, to know that they're coming back in the same areas that sightings tend to be happening. Now, I'm not saying that the sightings are not Sasquatch. I'm not saying that they're bears. What I'm saying is that there tends to be a correlation here, or seems to be a correlation here, between one sighting going up and the presence of the other, which people are not necessarily used to seeing. Even experienced hunters aren't used to seeing a black bear because they haven't been out there in huge numbers.
Yes. And it's like the kind of like what you brought up, the common sense of this field that a lot of people not lack, but sometimes don't really look at it. Because that's an issue I've actually been coming along with my third book I've been working on. Because right now I'm working on a kind of like a Sasquatch book, but talking about the other unknown primates seen here in North America. Like, people see devil monkeys, the North American ape phenomenon, where people see almost chimpanzee-like creatures, the gugweed, things like that. And it's an issue because I'm coming along it, I'm like, okay, all these creatures are seen right where Sasquatch are. But that's ecologically not possible. It's like, okay, proving that there's one unknown primate in North America is hard enough. Now you're saying there's 3 or 4 other types of primates seen here in North America. Just logically doesn't make sense. But then when you look at the evidence, you're like, okay, there's some evidence for these creatures. But then, that's the thing that I always bring up with cryptozoology is the ecology of cryptozoology. Like, okay, people that say they have Sasquatch on their land say, okay, I see Sasquatch, I see Dogman, I see Gugweed, I see Black Panthers, I see this, I see that. And it's like, ecologically, that's not possible. Like, you already have areas where there's bears and wolves and cougars. Now you want to add 2 or 3 other large major predators. It doesn't work out. Like when people bring up that they see Dogman and Bigfoot in the same area. There's something called niche differentiation, where 2 animals don't share the same niche, but they might share it at different times of the year. Like one during the winter might be Sasquatch, during the summer might be maybe Dogman, something like that. But a lot of times people don't look at it logically, and it just doesn't make sense from a biological perspective.
Sure.
That's why, like with this book, it's so hard because I'm like, okay, Sasquatch easily proven, but then you talk about all these other unknown primates seen here in North America, which there is evidence for them, yes, but ecologically it's harder to do the research because they just don't fit in ecologically into North America as well as Sasquatch.
Yeah. And let's start getting into some of those variations, specifically regionally, and how those regions differ, and how that might lead to the different morphologies of the same species in different variations.
Yes, of course. Like with the ones seen up in Pacific Northwest, the patty types, more gorilla-like, more robust, bigger, heavy, larger muscles, things like that. If you look at the Patterson Gimlin film, that's kind of basic Sasquatch seen up in the Pacific Northwest. Well, if you come down here in the South, creatures like the falcon monster, Momo, they're seen as more chimpanzee-like, a little less robust, more closer to. Also, one thing that's seen a lot here in the South is swimming. A lot of these animals are seen as being able to swim, like across rivers, things like that. You see that in the Pacific Northwest, but it's not as common, which makes sense biologically because we have more river systems here, and they are more broken up. Like you have the whole Mississippi River Delta, and the bottomlands and all that here in the South would make these creatures more able to swim, or more readily do it.
Okay.
And you have them being smaller here in the South. Like the main example I use is the falcon monster, the Legend of Ogden Creek. It's seen as maybe 7 to 8 feet tall. The ones in the Pacific Northwest are seen at like 9 feet tall at the largest, which also makes sense because of the broken environment we have here in the South. It's not the expansive woodland as the Pacific Northwest and Alaska and Canada.
Yeah.
So a smaller environment will cause these creatures to become smaller. And even if you look at the footprint finds of Sasquatch, the ones up in the Pacific Northwest are larger, usually 18, 19 inches long, while the ones in the South are maybe 16, 15 inches long, which that also goes with a biological process known as Bergmann's Law. Bergmann's Law states animals in higher latitudes are larger than the ones in lower latitudes. Look at bears. Polar bears, highest latitudes, largest bears. Grizzlies, middle latitudes, smaller than polar bears, but larger than black bears. Black bears are in a lower latitude and are one of the smallest bears in North America. The smallest bear in the Americas is the spectacled bear, and that's seen in South America, even lower latitudes. So we see this correlation between Sasquatch and their footprint finds, and also sightings. So that can also explain why the ones here in the South are smaller. Also, we have a history of sightings. You have sightings of like the gorillas that go back hundreds of years in newspapers. People saw gorillas and chimpanzees, but before that, they talk about wild men and people living in the forest because it's the cultural aspect. Once we knew about gorillas, people referenced Sasquatch as gorillas. Before we knew about gorillas, they referenced them as wild men because that's what we have in our minds. We can't describe them as a gorilla if we don't know what a gorilla is.
Sure. So
we have those stories that go back hundreds of years here in the South. We have along the Sabine River and parts of East Texas, you have stories of these creatures like the Sabine Thing. How people reference they described it as almost like a wild Indian back in the day, in the 1800s, that was covered with hair that would go and loot people's houses and be seen crossing roads, things like that, which we now know as Sasquatch. You have the skunk ape of the Florida and parts of like Louisiana. Like people describe as creatures reddish hair, chimpanzee-like, longer fur than the ones up in the Pacific Northwest, which might be more helpful towards mosquitoes and a lot of like the biting insects we have here in the South. And the behavior sets are different too. These creatures are seen as more solitary as the ones up in the Pacific Northwest. You have less track finds of groups than you see up in the Pacific Northwest. They're seen as more, like what we said earlier, not violent, but more territorial here in the South. And an interesting thing I've come upon with my research, and my research for my third book, is that there might be another unknown ape seen here in the South that might be misidentified as Sasquatch.
Really?
Back in the 60s, Lauren Coleman and Mark Hall called an animal called a nape. These are North American apes. And what makes them different from Sasquatch is their footprint finds, when people reference ape footprints, they look like this. It's a long human foot, but with a divergent big thumb, almost like modern gorillas and chimps. And that's interesting because for the longest time, I was like, okay, that doesn't make any sense. Why would it have a human-like foot, but then a divergent big thumb? But earlier, when we referenced the Dryopithecus species Oreopithecus, its foot looked exactly like that. A long human-like foot with a divergent big thumb. And it's like, okay, that's interesting. Like a Dryopithecine species had a footprint very similar to one found here in North America, but just a little bit smaller. So there might be another species of unknown ape seen here in North America, here in the South, that's more anthropoid-like. People describe them as more giant chimpanzees almost. There's stories of people finding footprints that they describe looking like a human hand, like because it has a divergent big thumb, which is not what we see in Sasquatch at all. But morphologically, they're also very similar because they're seen as obligate bipeds. They're primarily bipeds, but they are arboreal. They go up in trees. They can climb trees. They can do what we call brachiating, which brachiating is like carrying from one limb to another with your arms, like how we do on like a jungle gym or monkey bars. That's what brachiating is. And with Sasquatch, the limb proportions don't support that, unless there are stories of younger Sasquatch climbing trees and brachiating between branches, which is possible, of course, because they're smaller. But with these North American apes, it's seen animals 6 foot tall doing this. So it suggests maybe another species of primate, which with me, I've speculated on, okay, what is this? This could be an offshoot of Dryopithecus. That if, let's just say Sasquatch is Dryopithecus. This is all just speculation. And once it entered North America, some of it found a environment very similar to the one it came from. So why would it need to evolve into what we now know as Sasquatch? One's evolved into Sasquatch, a more prairie, open land biped, like what we now see as modern day Sasquatch. And one became a arboreal, swampland living creature that became what we now know as North American apes that have a foot very similar to modern day Oreopithecus. So it's a possibility because their behavior sets are also very similar. Maybe not the same species, but maybe offshoots of a same common ancestor.
Sure.
Like how we said earlier that all hominidae are origin from Dryopithecus itself.
Yeah. And you know, once again, bringing that up on screen, just the idea that there is a common species that seems to be a perfect springboard for all hominid species. And to think of that species surviving or relatives of that species surviving, what do you think the odds are for that, Ryan? Do you think that that is a possibility?
I think it's a possibility and not high probability, but it is probable because of the correlations between Sasquatch and this unknown and Dryopithecus. If you look at apes, the one big thing I have kind of against it is just how apes aren't very migratory. They don't move around a lot. Yeah. But if you look at the Dryopithecus, at least Dryopithecines, the genera of what Dryopithecus latifrons was found in, they were all around the world almost. They're in Asia, parts of Africa, parts of Europe. So they show that this creature moved around a lot. And it's a possibility that maybe during the time of Beringia, some did move over into North America. And that's how we have primates here, because people don't realize that we did have primates indigenous to North America, but those were very basic primates, very like what we kind of call plesiodaptiforms, which like lemurs, slow lorises, those types of creatures. But those went extinct here in North America about maybe more than 20 million years ago. Yeah. And there was a ghost lineage almost. We don't know where they came. We don't know where they went. They just kind of died out. So, most likely if there's a primate here in North America, it didn't evolve here. It came from somewhere else. So the possibility of a Dryopithecine surviving into the modern day and being known as what we now know as Sasquatch is highly probable. Because what we see, when people always bring up like the lack of fossil evidence and there's no evidence for this, there's no physical proof, which it is true, yes, but we know the primate fossil record is nowhere near complete.
That's right.
The best primatologists in the world will say we only know maybe 6 to 10% of all primate fossils. There's a saying around paleoanthropology that says all proof of human evolution can fit in a shoebox, like all the bones and everything. So a lack of fossil record, that's kind of what would be expected with a primate. Like, there's plenty of times what we call ghost lineages, like the lemurs in Madagascar. There's some species that just kind of came out of nowhere. And it's a ghost lineage because we have no evidence or proof of where they came from.
Yeah.
So, primate here in North America, we would expect it being what we call a ghost lineage as well, because there wouldn't be a lot of proof. There wouldn't be a lot of like evidence, because I don't see Sasquatch walking into tar pits or anything like that. And also, if these creatures did come from Beringia is covered in the Bering Sea right now. So not like we could find evidence of that there. And Alaska and Canada, a lot of it was covered up by what we call the Laurentide ice sheet, one giant piece of a glacier. So you wouldn't find any fossil evidence there. And the Pacific Northwest is very not inclusive to fossils because of the high acidic soil, the high amount of rainfall. So we really wouldn't expect any evidence of like origins of Sasquatch in North America because we're just not inclusive to fossils, especially primate fossils. But I can just only imagine if 10, 20 years down the line, if someone finds a fossil of a primate that's maybe 5 million years old, they're like, okay, that's interesting. Where did that come from?
Yeah.
Like the most recent primate in North America is an animal called Panamacetus. It was found in Panama before North America and South America connected. And this animal came out of nowhere. The last known primate from Panamacetus was 5 million years older than this. So, like, okay, we have a primate here in North America that just kind of came out of nowhere. So, why couldn't a modern day Sasquatch or Napes or even what people see the devil monkey, why couldn't these kind of just come out of nowhere because there's no fossil evidence for them?
Yeah. Yeah, and quite literally the fact of when it comes to fossil evidence, just to bring it back to the lineage of mankind, there's a reason why I want to know why it's called the theory of evolution when we still pretty close to hypothesis on that end. You know, even the most quote intact skeleton that we have would be Lucy.
Yes.
And this is an incredible rendering of Lucy, by the way. Really awesome. Let's scroll down through then. This is off the Natural History Museum. You can come down here and actually see the bones that they found. Here's an actual casting.
Yes.
So once again, that was a lot of cranial detail. That was a lot of facial detail, a lot of detail period to be coming off of that skeleton that has zero face, zero brow. It does have a complete jawline, which is nice.
Yeah.
You know, and if you've got the zygomatic, you can at least from there figure out partial skull size, things like that. Yeah. But once again, a pretty incomplete skeleton to be making the leap, so to speak, which is a leap It's a leap. I'm no creationist, Ryan. You know this, as does my audience. However, when it comes to saying that, like, teaching the theory of evolution as anything but a theory, I have problems, because that's not science. And when saying, like, how do you know Sasquatch exists? Because we don't have any fossils or intact skeletons. We ain't got any full fossils or intact skeletons of these others either. We have some bits and pieces and stuff like that, but nothing to show a direct lineage, things like that. So I consider that work just as incomplete as the work on Sasquatch. The only difference is we have numerous modern castings of footprints. We have numerous things like handprints, new things like hand oils, facial oils, things like that we're going to get to examine. So, I am a believer in the hominid species of North America and beyond. I believe that there is one. I don't think it would take a huge breeding population, you know. You just have to know about the breeding population and follow things. That's all. Yeah.
Like, and that's the thing too, like with like human evolution and all and origins. Like a lot of times if you look at skulls of like skull of Homo erectus, skull of Homo ergaster, you'll see a lot of places where we had to like fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
Like Lucy. Like, of course, there's no face there, so we took faces off of other Australopithecines afarensis and speculated on what they would look like.
Yeah.
Because it's not really speculation, it's highly educated guesses.
Sure.
Because we are taking measurements and things like that. Like, there are certain measurements with humans and primates that we can measure on. Like you've seen what I always bring to my conferences, I bring a Gigantopithecus skull. Well, skull, because everything that's not that jawline has not been discovered off Gigantopithecus. So Dr. Grover Krantz speculated on what the rest of the skull would look like. But modern day researchers think the Giganto skull wouldn't look the way mine looks, because it's very more gorilla-like, less pongonoid-like, because DNA has shown that these creatures were more related to pongonoids, orangutans. So, also they probably won't bipedal as well. They'll probably be quadrupeds. So a lot of times with these skulls, we have to kind of speculate on what they would look like. Like, it is a highly educated speculation, yes. It is scientifically proven. It's not just really a guess, but it truly is just kind of still speculating. Like, we take measurements, things like that. Like, I'm not a paleoanthropologist, so I can't really see it from their perspective, but I know it's not just like, okay, let's just make stuff up.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, which I know some people that are like against the whole scientific aspect. Like, oh, well, it's just guessing. Which like, no, there's math, there's science to this, of course. Yeah. And that's what we're doing with Sasquatch. Because some people have issues with like people like me that like try to speculate on what this creature is. But it's like, well, why not?
That's the job of science.
Like some people are like, well, we don't have the evidence, so why should we have an idea for where they came from? And I'm like, well, because we have to, everything has an origin point. So why not speculate on the origins of these creatures? Which is honestly something I really don't see happen a lot anymore.
There's zero evidence that matter is solid.
Yeah.
Zero. Like I would like to see the equation that shows me that this desk is a solid object and not just a repulsion of electrons by everything that we know to be physics.
Yes.
We call it a solid object, but you know, by everything else that we know to be actual science, it's far from solid. And that's the interesting thing is that the day you say science is complete, it's no longer science.
Yes.
You know, it is, science is forever evolving, forever changing. And I am I'm a big believer in the fact that we will get an answer. It will happen.
Yeah.
But
and that's also a kind of interesting fact too, is that like one thing I've kind of come upon recently with this research is kind of the changing face of cryptozoology as well, because as at least with me, I've noticed there's a kind of a lack of research anymore. A lot of people go after the more storytelling, telling eyewitness accounts and all that, but not a lot of people really do like, okay, what are these creatures? What are the origins of cryptids? Like, you read any Bigfoot book, it's going to be mostly sightings, not a lot of like, okay, it might be Gigantopithecus, and then that's it.
Yeah.
Like, well, I'll give you this one. Like, yes, Chris.
Oh, no, I was going to say, to me, I have a problem with anybody that has a problem with somebody whose field of study is cryptozoology, because at the same token, you may as well get into it with anybody whose field of study is quantum physics, an utterly theoretical science, utterly theoretical.
Yeah.
You know, there are people whose entire world and work is nothing but theory and hypothesis, Ryan, and without them, we would not have the advancements we have.
Yeah.
So like it's one of the most important things out there.
Yeah. Like with this book, my second book, it is a lot of speculation, but a lot of it is science-based. I don't have maybe one or two stories of Sasquatch sightings because, yes, that is interesting. It is data, but I want to go after the more like meat and potatoes of it, you might say. Like my foreword is written by Ken Gerhard himself. And Ken was like, no, he's like, we are missing books like this out of the field because
that's right.
We need that research. We need that the research in this study. A lot of people want to write a book about nothing but Bigfoot sightings, which is fun, yes, but it's not the research we really need. Like, yeah, we have all these stories, but who's going to look at the stories and like, okay, speculate? Okay, that's a cool behavior. That's a cool behavior. Put it all in maybe like what we brought up before, AI. Put all the sightings in AI. See what.
That's right.
What things we can speculate on? Migratory routes, where they seed. Are there more than maybe it's the same creature getting seen in the same areas? Yeah. Like, what can we find out from that type of research?
Yeah, exactly. Because you can once you start feeding that data in, specifically regionally, seasonally, everything else, man, that's how you come up with migratory paths. That's how you start seeing which rivers they're following during which parts of the year and everything else. Same way as with elk. And, citizen science wise, man, the thing I always recommend people do, I was talking about this with Chester Moore just the other day. If you're out there with trail cams, if you're out there Bigfoot hunting, Sasquatching, all that kind of stuff, folks, looking for the Jersey Devil, I don't care. Get a hold of your local university. Let them know. Like, guaranteed there's a biology department, something like that, who would love that footage. They don't have time to get out there. They don't have funding to get out there. But you could be helping citizen science-wise with so much conservation effort. Things like that. And without this data, they can't get the conservation of the space, which then leads to the disconservation of the animals that live in the space. Yeah.
Like, that's kind of like like the summary, like the ending of my second book. It's kind of a call to arms because look at how many species of primate have gone extinct.
Yeah.
Look, it's literally titled Prehistory of Sasquatch of Prehistory. All these giant megafaunal species have gone extinct. And so it could be because of environmental changes, humans, it's a mixture of both. So when modern Sasquatch research, I see is very important because the next 100 years or so, if we don't prove the species is real, it could be just another example of megafaunal extinction. Like, we have to prove the species is real in order to protect it. Like, Marion County, where Jefferson is in Texas, just had a law passed that said if you shoot a Bigfoot, anything like that, it's illegal. They're protecting a species that isn't proven to be real yet. And that's honestly what we need to do, is because if the species is out there, we do need to protect it, because it might be one of our closest living relatives, even if it's not human, it is very human-like. And that's something we can learn from. And like, there's kind of a podcast episode I've always wanted to do with a couple other researchers of like, okay, Sasquatch after discovery. What will we do after this creature was discovered? What type of laws, what type of things will we do after this creature was discovered? Well, let's just say if it's proven to be human, non-human, what would we do next? What would the litigation be? What would the legal actions be? Yeah. And that's kind of an interesting conversation right there, I believe, of like, what would happen if we proved this creature existed?
Oh, absolutely, because those efforts do not happen overnight, Ryan.
Yeah.
Conservation efforts, putting land aside, passing bills, those things don't just occur.
Yeah.
So once again, people like Craig Woolheater putting that out there and having that passed helps further that effort before it's even on radar.
Yeah. And it's also kind of an interesting topic too. Like, let's just say Sasquatch was discovered tomorrow.
Yeah.
Who would be researching it? Us cryptozoologists that have done this for years? Or would primatologists come in and be like, okay, no, we have this taken care of now. We know it's a real species. Let's go research it.
Yeah.
Who would be in charge of researching these species? The people that have been doing it for years that are seen as kooks and like crack pipes? Or would the primatologists come in and finally be like, okay, what are scientists? We got them.
Or would they now be the kooks? Because that's kind of the situation that NASA's up against. And what the head of the NASA UFO UAP panel directly said was like, we as scientists, as NASA, have been woefully disregarding our job. Our job is to look into anomaly. The job of science is the anomalous. It's there to explain the anomalous. So when you're subtracting the anomaly, like, you're not doing real science. You are now carving out the data for your intended ends if you're subtracting anomaly from your data set. So that's not real science. I'm sorry to tell anybody out there who's practicing science in such a way, you are culling your data. And that's exactly what they said had been happening. That is exactly what they said is wrong. They were like, because it has been in the box of UFO for so long, and we ridiculed people for looking into UFOs, we never actively did any work or study on it, and it apparently needs to be studied. I posit the other thing. Should a North American wood ape be found? Every single scientist that's out there that said like my ex's brother from Maine, who was an anthropology teacher and taught, like scientific anthropology and things like that, and was always like, there is no Sasquatch. That's crazy talk. You're a crazy person. Like, who's not allowed to teach about Sasquatch? You.
Yeah.
The one who said it wasn't there. Without using any means of science to prove it wasn't there.
Yeah.
Anybody who spread that doctrine, I would say you're not allowed to research it.
Yeah. Like what Carl Sagan said, evidence absence is not, lack of evidence is not evidence absence.
That's right. That's right.
Evidence for it being there doesn't necessarily prove it's not there.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. And because of good people like you, Ryan, this field will be furthered. Once again, the conversation, the real conversation behind these things, behind conservation for the right purposes, behind researching things in the right way, making sure that we follow the actual trails, not only of evidence, but accounts in the right and proper ways, like you're saying, all hugely important, man. Thank you so much for your time as always, coming on and really just deep diving into this stuff headlong. You're like me. You like just diving right in. So it's always awesome having conversation with you on air and off air. Let everybody know where they can go, of course, to pick up the new book. Do you have a release date yet?
Release date? I do not have it from David Wedderly yet. I will be contacting him pretty soon to see what the release date is. I have the artwork, all that done because artwork's done by Jason McLean.
Awesome.
I have a foreword written by Ken Gerhard. All that's been submitted. It'll probably be done hopefully by January. As soon as the release date is given, of course, I'll tell you, Chris. But if you want to get my first book, Cryptids of the World, you can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, as you can see right here. You can get it from Pat Price Books. If you think of a bookstore, it probably has it. Awesome. And the second book is going to be titled Sasquatch: A Prehistory of a Living Legend. As soon as I have a release date for it, I will be giving it to you, Chris, and you can put it out there and do whatever you want to do with it.
I cannot wait, man. I am so looking forward to that book and having you on to talk about it. I always love talking about your research. Once again, you come at things with such a level head, and with such a right scientific mind behind it, Ryan. So I'm greatly looking forward to that release. Thank you so much for all your time, as always.
Of course.
Hold the line real quick while we close things out. While you are online getting your copy of Cryptids of the World, make sure to stop on by curiousrealm.com/store. That is where you can find the link to Cryptids of the World and purchase your copy, folks. Curiousrealm.com is also where you can go to follow all of our guests' YouTubes and our YouTube and see all kinds of great content. Make sure to like, follow, subscribe, share, comment, all that kind of good stuff, everybody. Remember, the conversation is what moves humanity forward, and the conversation does not happen without your open hearts and your open minds. Hello, everybody, and welcome back from that commercial break. Thank you so much to our sponsors, especially WebWorks Wireless. WebWorks Wireless is your home for no credit check, no throttling, high-speed internet for all. They are our source for our live streams every week. Whenever you see us live on our website, that is brought to you by WebWorks Wireless and their amazing router that sits right here next to me at my desk. Stop on by and check them out, everybody. WebWorksWireless.com is the website. Our guest in this segment is the amazing Richard B. Spence. He has come on before. He has an amazing series of courses on what is now called Wondrium. It was at one point called just the Great Courses. Now it is Wondrium by the Great Courses. He has come on before talking about his Secret Societies class, which is awesome. But I ran across his class the other day, Secrets of the Occult. And I was like, man, I have been wanting to talk about the occult for so long on this show. And as you guys know, I prefer talking, like instead of just getting together with somebody and talking, I'd prefer to talk to somebody who's actually researched. Richard B. Spence is also the author of Secret Agent 666, Aleister Crowley, and his involvement with British intelligence. Welcome back to the show. Professor Spence, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine, and thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming back. I was very excited to see your Secrets of the Occult class because, and you spend, as you typically do in the first episode of a course, the first hour of lecture, going through and really demystifying what occult means. So many people have just a Kleenex understanding. of so many of these topics, whether it be paranormal, whether it be, paragovernmental and para-intelligentsia, UFOs, UAPs, everything gets thrown into a catch-all box, it seems like. And when it comes to occult and what occult is, it's very much the same way, correct?
Well, it's a word which takes on different meanings in different places. And so one of the things I always want to do in the secret society course, for instance, I wanted to start out by defining what we're talking about. All right. So we're talking about a secret society. Well, what is it? And or at least I'll establish what my definition of it is. So as we go on in this conversation, we'll be referring back to the same thing. And very true with occult. The term that is generally, what occult is commonly synonymous with is, at the very least, something which is creepy and spooky, or if not outright diabolical. There's a sort of, it's like, Satanism, the occult. Somehow those kind of blend together, and they're the same thing. They can be, okay, one could say, but occult is a much larger term, which really just means hidden. Something which is hidden, something which is disguised. And in particular, I think if you take the Latin back at its meaning, something which is hidden from sight, which you cannot see. And what's hidden, really, at the root of this concept of the occult, the hidden, is a hidden world. Or you can think about it in different terms, hidden dimensions. But the concept really comes down to the idea that the world of our senses, the phenomenal world that we as human beings experience through our senses, is only part of a much broader one, or a much more complicated one, which is full of all kinds of things that we can't see or hear or touch or smell, but which we may be able to sense in other ways, but which may also, even if we're not aware of it, it may be aware of us. And that's what lies at the root of what are called occult doctrines, and that lies at the root of certainly of everything that falls within religion. Because, and here is a controversial idea I will throw out. What we refer to as religion, in just about any of its forms, is a manifestation of the occult.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, as an altar server, as somebody who studied to be a Catholic priest, and I meant to have my copy of the Roman ritual right here so that I could turn it around and show where it actively says invocation of. No different than my books on the seals of Solomon, things like that. When it's talking about invoking a spirit, it's kind of funny how parallel those two things are. When you start looking at, things like the Goetia, and ritualistic high magic, and what we would equate to as Sunday service or daily mass as a Catholic. The parallels are absolutely there.
Well, think of it this way: as a Catholic, as a Hindu, a Muslim, whatever you want to pick any religion, one of the things that you believe in, and part of that, is a larger world.
Sure.
You believe in things you can't see. All right. If you believe in God, you can't see God, but you nevertheless believe that God is an active presence moving in the world, maybe controlling everything. Even though you believe that on the basis of not having any kind of physical manifestation or proof of that at all. Comes down to a matter of faith. It may come down to, events may occur which you can attribute to God, the devil, whatever you want. But the concept inherent in any religion is that there is a wider world than the ones we humans are physically aware of. And therefore, the purpose, if that's what the occult is, if the occult is this hidden world, occultism, are all those those different beliefs, methods, doctrines, techniques that are used to access that larger world. So see, it's actually pretty simple.
Absolutely. And I mean, even once again, the misunderstanding most people have is occult equals Satanism. And, there are not that many actual Satanists out there. I've been trying to get somebody from the Church of Satan here in town to come on the show and talk. But they are not out sacrificing people, folks. That is not what Satanists avow. It's not what they do at a service. Like that in and of itself is a huge misconception and misunderstanding, that many people have, because once again, all these things get thrown into a catch-all bin and then just get muddled in together. So let's kind of start breaking apart how the occult leads into everyday society and how the two tie together.
Well, I guess one of the things that I try to, maybe beat people over the head with in the course, or to bring up the same things repeatedly, is that the occult isn't necessarily something that's weird. Okay, it's not something that you are unfamiliar with. It doesn't have to be. It's not something which is frightening or, again, diabolical or sinister. It can be all of those things, but there's a whole set of just we live in common everyday occurrence and activities are related to this, because remember, it has to deal with the concept of a hidden world where there are hidden forces, and those forces can be accessed and utilized in this one. So I'll give you an example. One of the things which is fairly popular today in certain circles, always has been pretty much, is if you hear people talking about positive affirmations. Okay, that you give positive, something as simple and corny as looking at yourself in the mirror in the morning and going, today this is going to be the best day ever. Every day in every way, everything is getting better and better for me. The idea of affirming what it is you want, envisioning what you want to happen, and then repeating, and then this is the concept, which is the term which is often used, manifesting that reality. All right. Well, my friend, if that's what you are doing, I argue that even if you just wish repeatedly for something to happen, you are manifesting an intention which you are putting out there in one form or another, and you are practicing magic.
Absolutely. And that is one of the things that I have said over and over again on this show, especially when you start looking at the modern Christian movement, the folks like Joel Osteen, things like that, where they are talking about, manifesting these good things in your life, stuff like that. Like they are quite literally talking the exact same thing that New Agers were talking about back in the 60s and 70s.
And like everything else in modern occultism, that leads us straight back to who? Aleister Crowley.
Yes.
What Crowley did in a lot of ways is that through his writings, he sort of gave a voice or some sort of, Crowley's magic, his definition of magic, everything is just his. This is another thing about occultism, is that it's very much a kind of designer shop. I mean, you can change things. Well, think of it this way. If you in any way sort of believe that by intention and will you can manifest reality, then of course you can pretty much make it anything you want it to be. That's the whole goal in this case.
Yeah.
And that's something else, again, to understand about occultism, is that it's the doctrines in it are not, there's nothing really carved in stone. It's one of these things which is based upon intention. And therefore, that intention would seek all types. This is arguably the difference between what could be called good magic and bad magic, or, black magic. It's the intention behind it.
Yes.
So when you're trying to manifest the reality you want. So Crowley, I think, summed it up pretty well, and I'm going to paraphrase him. I get it pretty close. His definition of magic, which he thought was this kind of operative force that could be used to influence reality, was that Magic is the art and science of causing change to occur in conformity with will. Now, that's your will. So it's using willpower. It's using will. It's using intention to cause change. And what it comes down to, in a way, if you think of it that way, is that, and I think it's the right way to think of it, is this concept of magic, or this force, this intention and will, is to literally alter reality. And it's a, you know, it's a big question, because it presumes that reality is alterable.
Well, and you know, that is a regular topic of conversation on this show. When you start looking at the recent, in the last year, Nobel Prize winning quantum entanglement, the fact that two particles, despite distance, can influence each other. You are laying the foundation and the groundwork for these exact same things. You're in Idaho right now. I'm in Texas. We're by all means of, go ask any physics professor at Idaho State University. We are sharing an electron shell. We are 90% empty space. So when you start figuring that into the equation, magic with a K, as Aleister Crowley says, it does not seem too far off base.
Well, I mean, and in my course on the secrets of the occult, one of the things that I make constant mention of, I am not a physicist, but I will make constant mentions of the various quantum concepts in physics, in which, again, I'm going to grossly oversimplify this, but I think you were referring to it. You know, when you reduce things below the subatomic level, basically there's no there. I mean, that's right. There's like nothing. And so the first great magic act, you can think of it this way, the first great manifestation is the whole manifestation by God, whatever, who knows, our collective, whatever it is, somehow out of nothing, everything is created.
And agreed upon, Richard. That's the big part, is that it's agreed upon. You know, like time. To assume the fact that time works the same way on Jupiter is madness. You know, we gave time its boundary as humanity. Time would nowhere near work the same way, because mass and gravity work differently there. So time would work differently there. Like, all of these things are agreed upon as the illusion around us. So yeah, to think that we aren't able to Matrix Neo some things, so to speak, you know.
But the odd thing is that I don't remember, and I bet you don't remember either, ever signing off on that. Okay. No. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's there somewhere they had wrote, okay, this is what you're going to agree to. This is what reality, never question these things. All right. This is true. Never question that, or you're going to screw everything up. Okay, I'll sign right here in the dotted line, so let's get bored.
Yeah, never open the emergency exit door. Don't open it.
Okay, see that button? Don't push it.
Yeah. Well, you know, but we do have to think about this, because, and these things influence reality. I was just, after your show, I texted my brother, and I've researched Aleister Crowley. I own 3 or 4 original printings of some of his work. You know, I'm pretty familiar with his work, and I especially love some of the readings with Lamb. And I guess it had just totally passed my brain that all of the sessions with Lamb took place at Central Park West in New York. The same location that the Temple de Zool was at in Ghostbusters. I was like, what a nod from Dan Aykroyd, who's completely into such things, you know.
Yes,
but it was like, wow, deep
Aykroyd
cut.
might be the guy. Yeah,
I was like, that's a deep cut right there. Like it had never even dawned on me the number of times I've read that and just cursorily ran across Central Park West, and not even realize that it happened at the exact same place. But that's just it. These things influence movies. They influence so much of popular culture and things around us, to the point of, you know, Aleister Crowley even being on the cover of the Beatles.
Yeah, I mean, he's only one of many people who were there, but I mean, Crowley's influence on popular music, popular culture, particularly rock music in the 60s and 70s. It was, in fact, one of the projects I'm a consultant for is a proposed series that will look at the broad influence of the occult, particularly in rock and roll. And of course, that brings in Crowley. And we're always sort of, those of us who've been working on that are sort of amazed. Once you start looking, it's pretty much everybody.
Yeah.
It's not just Alice Cooper, all right, or people sort of pretending to do these things, but it was a very strong, pervasive influence. And and there's a natural. I mean, occultism connects to everything, because if you look at the realm of music, let's just take that for example. And one of the things that all musicians, certainly those who make a living off of it, do is that it's dependent very heavily on inspiration. Right? You have to be inspired. Songs, symphonies, all of those things grow out of the inspiration of the artist. And the Greeks had a way of explaining this, and that was that we're influenced by muses. There are these supernatural beings who come and who pick mortals and inspire them in some way. And whether the muses are any more than just kind of a neat little story or do touch upon some other kind of reality, that's the idea. And inspiration in and of itself is impossible to explain. Certainly, I think everybody has had some experience in which an idea probably seemed brilliant at the time, may not always prove to be, just sort of pops into our heads.
Yep.
As if you'd never thought about it before, and there it is. And that too is one of these, almost in a small way, a kind of miraculous, unexplainable quantum process, which takes place to one degree or another in everyone's life every day. And they would emphasize that the occult and occultism is something which is everyone, every place, every day.
Well, and also the fact of occultism ties in so many more things other than just belief. It starts getting into symbology. It starts getting into sacred geometry. It's like so many things cross over with it. And you have to kind of wonder, because some of that is, of course, echoed in Crowley's work. Some of that is, of course, echoed in Rites of High Magic, sigils, seals, that sort of thing. But at the same token, with Crowley came not just the high magic side, but also came the birth of the New Age side. And I've always wondered if the birth and the encouragement of the New Age side was there to help subtract from the actual factual esoteric side of Crowley's high magic. And the ideas of, sacred geometry, going back to Kabbalism, things like that trace back to numerous, because he drew from numerous cultural backgrounds and cultural magics to produce.
You remember mentioning the idea of occultism constantly reinventing itself. It's one of these things which is that everyone invents in a slightly different way. And you could say it's like comedy. You steal from other comedians. You appropriate things. You hear a good joke, you take it and you bring it in. And it's but one example of that is that a very important figure in 19th century in the popularization of occultism, of what you can also call mysticism, but the popularization of occultism and mysticism in the 19th century was by one woman in particular, or let's say by this one woman, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. She was a Russian mystic, had an interest in metaphysics and all assorted weirdness from an early age, and then later founded a movement called Theosophy, which was basically, and that's really in many ways the kind of root of the modern New Age, which is this kind of blending of Western magic and esotericism. That is essentially European magic with Asian magic, particularly with that of Hinduism and Buddhism. And that's what Blavatsky did. She took Western magic, she mixed it with Tibetan and Buddhist mysticism, and voila, the age of the mystical guru was born, and it became a kind of cosmopolitan occultism.
Yeah.
Now, on the other hand, one of the other things that Helena Blavatsky was, in addition to being an avowed medium spiritual, is being the chosen of the ascended masters, our ethereal or spiritual overlords, who I don't know, are sitting lotus style, floating in a cavern under the Himalayas, or wherever you want to imagine them to be. But that's a good way to imagine them. And they're guiding the spiritual evolution of humanity. And they picked Helena Blavatsky in the way they pick other people in order to be their mouthpieces. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
All right. This is the way this whole sort of game seems to work. But the other thing about her is that she was also a fraud. I mean, she was a liar. She lied about things. It's easy to establish that. She made things up. She faked things. And towards the end of her life, one of the scandals that emerged was carried out by the Society for Psychical Research, which was a society in London that appointed itself, it's true, who else, appointed itself to study what we would now call psychic phenomenon and try to subject it to some kind of rational analysis. They were not debunkers. They were not hostile, but they also weren't suckers. And what happened is that it wasn't with great difficulty of proving that, Helena Blavatsky, which isn't to argue that she didn't receive channeled messages from somebody, but in some cases, she made that stuff up. And this is the pattern which you will find when you begin to look. You'll even find it with Crowley. And I think that Crowley, my opinion, for whatever that's worth, is that he was very sincere about some of the things he believed, but I don't think he was necessarily quite as certain about exactly why he believed them. I mean, he was mystified by his own experiences. And
yes.
And in part, he's trying to figure out how all of this stuff works, and he's proposing different models for it. But Crowley himself wasn't beyond faking it if he had to.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is one of the things that's easy if you look around today and look at the people who are often referred to as cult leaders. And first of all, you're going to find a lot of them are selling some version of Blavatsky's theosophy.
Yep.
Right, really, that idea, she could sue any number of people for plagiarism of simply ripping off her ideas. But that's how the game is played. You take it, you run with it, and so these ideas are constantly being recycled. And I suppose to carry that, you begin with Blavatsky. And again, if you're looking around on Amazon Prime, I think it's there. It could be on Netflix. I can never keep these straight. There is a series currently running which is called Love Has Won, the Mother God Cult. I think it's only like 3 episodes.
Yep. No, my wife and I just watched that.
Okay. And if you listen closely, you'll figure out that what the woman who proclaims herself God is essentially selling is this kind of version of Blavatsky's theosophy with certain names changed. So while Helena Blavatsky claimed to be getting messages channeled to her from the ascended masters like Master Moria and Hoot Kumi and others, Amy, which I think is the name of this person, claimed to be getting these messages from the ghost of Robin Williams.
From the ghost, it was quite literally a panoply.
Yes,
a panoply. It was like the cover of Sergeant Pepper's.
Yes,
the number of spirits that came to her, and It's very interesting because there were, and don't get me wrong, like I will attest till the day that I die, Doctor, Professor, that I have had more than one full on in the presence of what I know to be my creator God experiences in my life. And those are the things that have steeled me and moved me to do things like this and have these conversations. They are the things that have moved me forward in life. However, I cannot say it's ever gotten to the point where I claim to be the one who is suffering for the world's ills, that I claim to be using for the suffrage of the world's ills. And that's my medicine. Like, these are the things that eventually led to her death. No spoiler alerts, folks. I'm sorry for any spoiler alerts, but yeah, like,
I mean, her primary spiritual medicine is vodka.
Yeah,
So,
it was that and colloidal silver by the liters a day.
yes. All right.
So
Well,
yeah, it was, and granted, you know, I like I told you before the show, watched numerous things about cults lately. I don't know why. I've followed a huge professional in the world of like pulling people out of cults for years, and I've been wanting to get them on, but the mentality fascinates me, I guess, because at heart, I am a true believer's true believer. I am looking for the evidence that proves to me otherwise, you know, to the point where, I say, oh, no, like, faith implies belief. I don't believe, I know. Like,
yes. And that's a very important distinction to make, which is, again, often confused, which is that, you know, what you believe, you don't know.
Yeah.
Because then you would know it. You wouldn't have to believe it.
Yeah.
And generally what we go by, though, I mean, I'd say, you know, 90% of those things that influence our actions are the things that we believe. And very often we believe things because we've just been told to believe them. So they become part of our operative reality.
Yeah.
And it's, and I want to make it clear to people listening here that I'm not cutting up by saying is that I didn't just say that all occultism, and along with that, of course, religion, which is a component of occultism, that it's all fakery.
No.
Right? No, that's not, but it is an inextricable matrix of reality and fraud at the same time.
Yes.
These things are always being introduced. There is and again, you know, not to pick on, you know, Mother God, Amy. No. But I think she's a pretty good target for that because it's
the most recent, most accessible, you know.
But it also is. This was my personal opinion: is that even as a con, all right,
yeah,
it's just bad. I mean, I kept thinking, you know, this is it completely. It's just a hodgepodge of different sorts of ideas. I don't even know what they were selling, and I'm not even sure they knew what they were selling. But nevertheless, the interesting thing is that it didn't sell a lot, but it sold. I mean, one of the things you can there were people who devoted their entire lives to her.
Yes,
and it's I mean, this is the unpleasant part of this, but it's one of those realities as human beings we have to confront, is that we're kind of gullible, okay? And I don't exempt myself from that.
Absolutely. I mean,
the things I get fooled by the things I get fooled by. But to ever assume that you're just too clever to ever get taken in by the con is a mistake in this case. So I wouldn't fall for her con, but I wouldn't certainly say I wouldn't fall for something else. But it is this, and it comes down to this idea that in this wider world, that there are different, possibly contending forces at work. So here's another sort of basic concept that I go over again in the course. Okay, there's this hidden world. And the thing about this hidden world, like the one we live in, is that it's inhabited. and not by us, but there's something else. Okay, there's something else which is, and I think this is a pretty common human idea. One of the things that human beings figured out in some way pretty early is that we're not really alone. That there are other things that are beings or sentient. There's another will which is operating. Think of it this way: we have our individual wills, and of course, what the basic concept of occultism teaches us is that, or argues, is that through the focusing of that will, through our wills, we can influence our reality individually and collectively.
Yes.
Now, on the other hand, there's now this larger invisible world inhabited by apparently invisible beings who also have their will, and with which we willingly or unknowingly, in both those cases, interact. And the question often comes down, one of the mysteries here is, what do they want?
You? They want you? That's pretty much the answer. And we recently just had a discussion. It was Halloween night. It was episode 100, but it was demon seeding. The concept of these demons that require a physical host to carry forth, and exorcism. Those were the two topics with two different guests. And the thing that we say regularly, and once again, I regularly espouse on the show, Professor, I am a recovering Catholic. I'm not going to say a lapsed Catholic. Yes. I'm not going to say I'm a lapsed Catholic, because that would say like, oh, I still go to mass every 3-4 weeks, something like that. No. Whenever somebody in my family's like, hey, let's go to church, I'll gladly go with them. But I don't need the edifice and the people to commune with my greater creator. However, the one thing I will always say is, you want to be agnostic, you want to be, atheist, that is perfectly fine. That is perfectly understandable. Just remember, they believe in you. Whether you believe in them or not is not the point. The point is that, they're out there and they believe in you. And yes, you brought up a very interesting point, the idea of consent. Even the idea of consent whenever you were doing something just for fun, just for play, what have you, how do we know that there is not an entity there that is hijacking that trope in your mind that you would be okay with, that would give your consent? Much like in the movie The Exorcist, when Captain Howdy, the spirit, possesses Regan, he never reveals like, hey, nice to meet you, Regan. My name's the demon Pazuzu. I'm the African god of the West Wind. I'm here to possess your soul now. That cool? That's not how that happened. She went to play with something and the spirit was like, oh, I see, you're playful. What would you be okay with? Oh, something named Captain Howdy. Okay. And that began the relationship. So it's interesting to see that, and to once again see these ideas that are there and taught in occultism, taught in numerous places, literally making their way onto the screen. Like it wasn't even obscured or hidden, which I think was a big part of the Catholic Church's problem with the movie and the film to begin with, was that so much of the actual rite was revealed, so much of the words from the actual rite were revealed, but also those rules that are there were revealed, and that the rules of participating or not participating with what's coming from the other side, because it's there.
Well, you can even take something, there are the sort of magical instruction book, grimoires.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Hoary terms of black magic, which are often ways to summon various entities of one kind. Call them demons, call them what you will. Never, this is the way you establish. But one of the things that any grimoire makes quite clear, if you're paying attention, is that this is dangerous. Okay. At no point that you proceed at your own risk. That's certainly something that Aleister Crowley understood very well and always would warn people about, is that you proceed at your own risk. For instance, there's one of Crowley's later somewhat infamous followers was an American rocket scientist and occultist named Jack Parsons, John Whiteside Parsons. I think probably a lot of listeners will know something of his story. And yes, Parsons for a time was connected to L. Ron Hubbard, and around 1946, the two of them went off into the Mojave Desert or around Pasadena, and they conducted a series of rituals called the Babylon Working, which was designed to summon an entity, the spirit of the goddess Babylon, which was mostly sort of Crowley's invention, and incarnate her in human form. And Parsons wrote to Crowley about what he and Hubbard were doing. And Crowley's response to this was not positive. He did not say, hey, that's great. You guys should really get. No, his idea was that these people are idiots. You should not do this. They don't know what they're doing. And Crowley's whole reaction is he was really quite concerned about what it was, that what he thought people who did not know what they were getting into was a part of that. So Crowley himself would be the first to acknowledge that this was a very tricky thing to become involved in. And he had been involved throughout his career in various invocations of different entities, and took that type of thing pretty seriously. But it's part of what these things, that rather than to give a different, what these other things do, in very simple form, is that they're constantly messing with us.
Yes.
In various forms. And this is it. They have a clear advantage in that they would appear to be more aware of us than we are of them. We tend not to be aware of them unless they want us to be, whereas they seem to have a much better idea as to what's going on. They have some kind of peculiar interest in us that in some way we seem to be necessary to help them accomplish certain ends. Their motivations are often obscure. And I'm talking about, you've got this spectrum of these beings. You've got demons and you've got angels. And here again, I would want you to tell me exactly how you tell the difference between the two.
It's not extraordinarily easy. A lot of people, demons to me are precursory. They were there pre-angel. There are fallen angels, most definitely, but demons are something else entirely than a fallen angel. When you're talking fallen angel, you're talking about like the Watchers and things like that also that, bred with man and created the Nephilim. That kind of stuff.
What we're doing here is that we're giving all kinds of names to these things. And this is one of the things that humans love to do. We always give a name to everything. Yeah. Every tree has a name. Okay, every animal has it. We name things. That's our shtick. All right. But it also creates the kind of, I think, false illusion in some cases that by naming something, you control it.
Exactly.
And to give you an idea how that can be applied elsewhere, if you look into the realm of psychiatry and mental illness, you have the ever-expanding compendium of all the various illnesses and disorders that exist. Okay, find any kind of odd human behavior. It was doomed to be odd, may not be, and there's some sort of name for it. But that's what we do. The people are behaving oddly, and they seem to do so in these particular patterns. So we'll call that a disorder, and we'll call it borderline personality disorder, which to me describes nothing. All right. It's a name. But what we've done is we've given a name to the demon. And somehow by naming it, it gives us a kind of control over it.
Well, and
mostly an illusion, I think, but there you go.
Well, and you know, whenever I used to teach religion and spirituality, and specifically spend the first month of classes on the book of Genesis, because if you don't, especially if you don't understand those two stories occurring concurrently, and how they break down and the different cultures that they come from, quite literally, that is the reason why in the one story, Adam is naming the animals. Because according to that tradition, when you name something, you have dominion over it. You are now the one in control. That's the whole reason for a woman taking a man's name and, you know, things like that. That's where all those things trace back to, is the root of, yes, us wanting the control over something that is a totally unknown quantitative to us.
Yeah, but it gives the world a kind of definition.
Yeah.
Well, you know, but you go back to these, you know, whether you're talking about demons or angels, whatever their differences might be in origin, they can do a perfectly good job of imitating.
Yes.
I mean, from our perspective, we really can't tell particularly well. I mean, we don't seem to be, and it's just,
well,
you know, if you look at most stories about angelic encounters, if you look at everything from, well, Joan of Arc, you know, well, why was it an angel? Because they told her they were saints, right?
Yeah.
And you know, she believed them, being such a peasant girl that she was. If you look at the miracle of Fatima, the Portuguese children who saw the Virgin Mary and others saying, one thing to notice is that often this doesn't work out well for the humans.
Yep.
Okay, and early death is usually results in the death of the person who is connected to it, and it's the
death or the madness of,
or the madness. But that's what that maybe is one of the most basic ideas of a cautionary tale in dealing with what in the course I just referred to. There's an episode called The Others, and I try to go all the different sort of versions of these things that have been around. So when you mess around with the others, you never know exactly what you're dealing with, and you never know exactly what their motivations are, and pretty much they'll tell you anything.
My God, I need to have you on so many supernatural panels, Richard. I'm not even joking. Sincerely, this is one of the things that we discuss regularly on the show when it comes to cryptozoology, cryptids, specifically Bigfoot. And experiences out in the woods where it's like Bigfoot walked through a portal. Okay. I'm not saying that the experience that you had didn't happen, but is that the hominid species known as Bigfoot that I firmly believe exists in the woods of North America? There's much evidence to point that way. However, when you start talking about portals and other things and glowing eyes and that kind of stuff, could it be one of these, quote, others that once again is hijacking a trope in our mind that, hey, you're out Sasquatch hunting. You'd be perfectly open to seeing this. And now that is, you being open to that experience is now your consent into their system.
Yeah. It's you were talking about scenes from movies that deal with occult themes, and that's the feeding back into this into popular culture.
Yeah.
But there was a film that was done a few years ago called The Witch, which is set in New England in the 17th century.
I love that movie.
Which people either love it or hate it for some reason.
My wife loves it.
I kind of like it.
She hates it. I loved it. I loved it because of the end and the reveal.
The scene, yes, at the very end, the witches are speaking Enochian. So, okay.
Yes.
So if you're going to get geeky about these things, you get into that. But there's a scene towards the end where Tamison, the girl, our protagonist, our heroine, I guess, is eventually all of her family is dead, but she's had some difficulties, and her family's all died in very unpleasant forms. And she's talking to Black Phillip, which is this huge black goat that we've kind of guessed all along might possibly be the incarnation, because it's been talking to her little siblings. So at one point she tries, I think in desperation, she goes, well, are you going to speak to me, and something. And eventually the goat off screen does say something, but it asks this very basic and important question: what dost thou want? Yeah. All right. And that's very often the question. Well, here's another sort of concept in the idea of occult. The occult universe and occult physics. The physics of occultism is the same as with everything else. There is cause and effect. And the simpler way to think of it is that you don't get something for nothing.
That's right. Nothing
is given away for free. So when Black Phillip, the devil, asked Thomason, what do you want? It's the basic question. And then he names off some things, like pretty dresses, travel to live deliciously. Is one of those. And of course, her response to what do you want is what can you offer? Okay. And when it gets down to this idea of acceptance, what has been made there without signing anything is a pact. We are now negotiating. What do you want? Well, what can you offer? And then there, of course, is what is the price? The price is her soul, which is sold through the completion of the contract of making her signature in the book. But it all begins with this process of negotiation. And that's one of the things that you can use that. One can, arguably, you can use the mechanisms of occult practice. You can use mental facilities, rituals, which are basically a way of focusing your intention. That's all rituals do. They're a form of self-hypnotism or group hypnotism. Yes. They focus intention, because everything in this, but it's true. But then if you look at it, it's true for everything in life. It's not just a goal. Everything is about intention.
Absolutely. A prime example I would give people is I'm a Deadhead. Love the Grateful Dead. There is a different vibe going on at a show like that, or Fish, Dave Matthews, because everybody is there with the intent of having that experience. And it's different. It's different than other bands because there is not the unified field of thinking when it comes to it. And it's pretty remarkable to see it in action, to see those things, to see that mass swath take over. Because I mean, when you start looking at things, the whole reason I got into this, is because dancing, along with chanting, things like that, the rhythmic moving of your body can do the exact same thing and change quite literally the brain waves in your brain. That is how Sufi mystics and whirling dervishes got to their points of ecstasy and
voodoo priests.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is getting to a point of tantric dance, where the endorphins in your body change, and that changes the brain waves in your actual brain. It's remarkable how these things all tie together. And once again, I think that the tie together of them, Professor, is the occult. That's the occult that whatever conspiracy hypotheses you ascribe to out there, folks, that's the occult that the big capital THEY are trying to hide from us, is that all these things are connected. And many ancient cultures understood that, and we have come to a point of huge misidentification and misunderstanding. And there are many people who are more than willing to let that keep going on because it serves the greater good that they see. So I want to thank you for this amazing course, Richard.
Well, I'm glad you enjoy it. And of course, I hope other people do too.
It is one of those, like, I love your Secret Societies course. You really do have a very, we were speaking about it before the show. There's something special when you get to stand in front of a classroom and you get to break down topics like this and you get to talk about them at the end of a class in a 10, 15-minute Q&A format with people that you're teaching. But you really do have an amazing way of tying all of these literally just massively deep and thick topics together in such a common sense way. I mean, I've had some amazing professors in my time. I am so entirely glad that I have run across your courses, man. You are by far one of my favorite professors I've ever had.
Well, okay. Well, thank you.
Not even
that
joking.
Is high praise indeed, and I thank you very much for that. It's I think we were talking before we started that there's an element of performance even in something like a lecture.
Yeah.
And now there is a difference between that and what I do in the great courses, because in the great courses, I have written a script and I and my editor have gone over that script, and there have been changes, because every episode you've got about 30 minutes. Okay. And that's what you have to work with.
Sure. But
that's an interesting challenge. And it's a challenge I appreciate, because one of the things that having a limit either in the number, you can explain this in 5,000 words, you can explain it in 30 minutes, you can do it. And then the challenge is to do that. And that's where you have to decide what are the things, what can I best spend my time on discussing, how much detail do we want to go to into this and that. And all of this is a process of helping you refine the ideas, but it's the connections between all of these things that I think that I find the most fascinating.
Same.
And it's, I think another thing I mentioned, even in terms of common rituals that we go through, well, we're coming up on Christmas, right?
Yep.
All right. Christmas is a set of rituals. It's these things that people do all the time. And those rituals, even if you don't know what the meaning is, you're still sort of participating in this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's one of the things I can remember, I mentioned in this, is it was being in high school and having the obligatory pep rally.
Yes.
All right. Where everybody gets together, somehow you're going to be taken out of class. We're going to come here. We're going to spend the extra time, and we're all going to and we're going to watch people dance around in animal totem costumes, and we're going to chant to the death of our enemies. We're going to focus our intention to do what? Win and to defeat our foe. We'll even, in some cases we'll carry out, ritual incinerations of, imaginary cardboard coffins of our enemy. That, again, it's maybe the kind of low end of the occult speed spectrum in terms of, but that is a ritual.
Absolutely.
It has intention, and it is meant to change reality.
It is meant to mentally bring you all together for common purpose.
To manifest the future you wish to see.
That's right. And to hype your warriors into a state of frenzy, what have you. And, even I used to spend a whole point this time of year going over the history, because I'm Roman Catholic. We loved nothing more than whenever we came in somewhere going, oh, you have a ritual and holiday that time of year? Well, so do we. Look at that. It's very, very similar to yours. You should just be Catholic. The whole concept of a Christmas tree, tinsel, everything else, that is utterly pagan rooted.
No, there's nothing. Okay. There's nothing biblical about it. Yes. No. It's just And it's pretty much true with the Easter Bunny and the rest of it. But, people like doing those things because they're reassuring and they're fun and they appear to be harmless. And, they aren't manifesting. Okay. We'll all sort of manifest, love and brotherhood for the Christmas season. And it's all about gift giving and greed, that as well. But we'll
Happy
participate
holidays, everybody.
in these kinds of rituals.
Here's the thing. I don't not participate in Christmas, but I do tell my family, like, hey, please, don't forget, Dalbus has like 3-4 different Christmases that he goes to. He doesn't need eight presents from each of you. Maybe an educational gift and a toy, like, something along those lines. Because yes, I am not down with the commercialization of it. I am all about celebrating Chris Hanukkah, whatever it is this time of year that is your celebration du jour. Go out, celebrate it, because yes, it is there as an intended ritual to bring humanity together in a different way. And it's one of those that I think, as far as egregore, things like that, I don't think you could get better than the holiday season. As far as
it's in terms of individual.
I think Santa may be one of the best golems ever, and we'll have to have you on again to discuss quite literally the history of the golem and that story. Because there's
Santa's whole sort of dubious origins, possibly as a devil.
Right.
Anyway,
thank you, Coca-Cola.
They changed that. They changed that completely from
absolutely
his child stealing earlier elfin demonic self. So
him and his buddy Krampus.
But see, if you don't like them in one way, they'll just appear in another way.
That's right. Give it a little break, and we'll reinvent it.
The Santa that you want to have.
That's right.
I can, talking about high school pep rallies, though, and this probably has something to do with just my, I don't know, perverse sociopathy or whatever it is. But I can remember, I didn't like being forced into these things. All right. I always felt that I was being dragooned into a war, which I didn't want to fight. Right. I didn't get it. I didn't get why this. And so I can remember sitting at these things, you're in the midst of this whole sort of crowd of people who are now working themselves up into some sort of endorphin frenzy. And I just decided I was going to resist that. Okay. I was going to reject the hive mind, and I was going to sit here, and I was not, I'm sitting here, I'm saying everything, but I am inwardly not participating.
Yeah.
I'm not signing on. And it's I'd say that's kind of a stupid attitude in a lot of ways. I would say in other cases that has served me quite well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And it's, it helps in some cases of, there are cases really, and I think we all know this, where resisting the hive mind is the smartest thing that you can do.
Absolutely. In other instances where it's like, sometimes the go along to get along ain't so horrible, and can be the best thing to do in the long run. And I literally just had my 30th high school reunion, Professor, and I got to help plan it. I didn't get to attend it, but I got to help plan it.
Oh, okay. Well,
but during that planning part, there was somebody who was like, well, I mean, we graduated. I think I graduated with like 430 students, something like that. Like, it was a big class, and somebody in the meeting was like, oh, well, we've only got like, I think it was like 100 people that RSVP'd. And they were like, I hope we get more. And I was like, hey, man, like, you're shooting a quarter of people 30 years later. I'd say that's a pretty good percentage if that's the case. And, you got to remember that not everybody went to a pep rally on a Friday. Those are probably exactly the people you can expect to see at the high school reunion. Not the ones that, just like went limp and went with the crowd because it was easier than fighting through the crowd to get out of the school. They just went with the flow and went anyway, so yeah, we as a society, tend to look away from things like that. We tend to either fall in full force or run away, hands in the air. It's interesting to see that. And we'll explore that in so much more detail next time we have you on. Thank you so much again for the time. I greatly appreciate it. I assure you.
Well, it's my pleasure.
It will not be as far in the distance next time because I want to keep talking about the occult, everything else. This is a fantastic series. So
we won't wear that topic out anytime soon.
Absolutely.
I can guarantee you that.
Well, hold the line real quick while we close things out with the audience, Professor Spence. While you are online checking out all of the amazing classes from Richard B. Spence over at Wondrium by the Great Courses, which, by the way, folks, you can find on Amazon. If you're an Amazon Prime member, just look up Great Courses. Just look up Richard B. Spence. You'll find all these things. While you're online checking all of that out, make sure to stop on by CuriousRealm.com. That is where you can like, follow, subscribe. That's where you can find all the books and courses from our guests. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in, everybody. It is your open hearts, open minds that make the conversation, and it is the conversation that moves humanity forward. So remember, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and stay curious. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you for tuning into this episode of The Curious Realm. Stay tuned for more guests, forbidden topics, and hidden truths. Download the official Curious Realm app and view the Knowledge Vault on our website, CuriousRealm.com. Follow us on social media by searching Curious Realm. Curious Realm is available on your favorite podcast services, as well as YouTube, Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV through the APR TV app, available on all app markets. Thanks for listening. Stay curious, and remember, the other side is always watching.